Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift back in time to an age of gold and genius in ancient India. Picture a world not of dusty ruins, but of gleaming cities, universities bustling with scholars, debating the shape of the earth, and artists carving divine stories into stone with breathtaking skill. This is the India of the Gupta Empire, a period so luminous it's called the Golden Age. But let's be honest, if you were dropped into this era, your chances of surviving the local diseases, let alone a stray cobra or a poorly thought out political opinion, are slim. No antibiotics, you see. A paper cut could be a death sentence. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. As always, I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. So drop your city and what time it is for you in the comments below. It makes our little community feel that much closer. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on a dusty road somewhere in the Gangetic Plain, the heartland of northern India. The year is somewhere around 250 CE, and the air itself feels fragmented. It's heavy with humidity, the scent of cooking fires, damp earth, and the faint, ever-present smell of cattle. There is no grand empire here. Not anymore. The memory of one lingers, like the ghost of a giant. The Mauryan Empire, the great unifier that once stretched across nearly the entire subcontinent, is now the stuff of grandparents' stories. Its magnificent stone pillars, erected by the Emperor Ashoka centuries ago, still stand in fields and by roadsides, but their inscriptions preaching unity and peace feel like a message from another world. They are relics, their authority long since faded. In the northwest, the mighty Kushan Empire, which once connected India to the Silk Road and the Roman world, has crumbled. And in the south, the Satavahana dynasty has also withered away. What's left is a chaotic and vibrant patchwork quilt of kingdoms, a free-for-all of local chieftains, ambitious warlords, and minor dynasties, all vying for a slightly bigger piece of the pie. You trudge past a series of fields, each likely belonging to a different petty king with a terribly grand title. The roads are less royal highways and more enthusiastic suggestions of a path. Every river crossing is an adventure, and you start to think that the person who eventually standardizes bridge construction deserves their own national holiday. Your coin purse is a jumble of different currencies. A silver piece with a profile of a Scythian-looking king here. A worn copper coin from a local republic there. It's a logistical nightmare just to buy a piece of flatbread. This political fragmentation is a mainstream historical fact, the essential backdrop for the story to come. It was an era of intense regionalism. As you walk, you hear a dozen different dialects. You see different styles of dress, different banners flying over small, mud brick forts. You pass a local tax collector for some minor princeling, and you can't help but feel he has all the authority of a modern-day homeowners association president. Mostly just a fancy title and the power to annoy people about the state of their art. In the midst of this decentralization, you hear strange whispers, tales of the Naga kings from the city of Padmavati, a dynasty that claims direct descent from serpents. They are a regional power, their legitimacy rooted not in grand conquest, but in ancient, earthy myths that feel a world away from the organized bureaucracy of a true empire. This is the kind of quirky, localized power that thrived in the vacuum. Historians still argue whether this period was a true dark age of chaos and decline, or simply a time of political rearrangement where art, religion, and trade continued to flourish, just on a smaller, more local scale. Looking around, you can see evidence for both sides. The roads may be terrible, but the markets are still lively. The central government is gone, but the village council still meets under the banyan tree. Life is precarious, but it goes on. Yet, you can feel a yearning in the air, a wariness, with a constant uncertainty. Merchants long for safe roads, free from the endless tolls of every self-proclaimed kinglet. Farmers pray for a power strong enough to keep roving bandits away from their harvests. Priests and monks hope for a wealthy patron who can fund the building of grand temples and monasteries. The whole land feels like a board game that has been knocked over, its pieces scattered. Everyone is waiting for a hand to reach down and set them all in order again. And as you find a place to rest for the night, listening to the crickets and the distant howl of a jackal, you feel it too. A sense of anticipation. Somewhere, in this chaotic landscape, a new power is beginning to stir. In the old, respected land of Magadha, a family with a simple name is starting to make moves. A name you will soon come to know. Gupta. Your travels finally lead you into the ancient land of Magadha, the very ground where the Mauryan emperors once ruled the known world. But the Pataliputra you see now is not the glorious city of legend. It's important, yes, a hub of trade and old money, but it has a worn, tired feel to it. It's a capital city in waiting, a place living off the fumes of its own history. The whispers you followed have led you here, to the territory controlled by the family that is starting to make a name for itself. You soon learn their progenitor. The patriarch of this ambitious clan is a man named Sri Gupta. The name itself is deceptively simple. Gupta is a common suffix, not a grand dynastic title. It's a bit like hearing about a future global empire being founded by a guy named Mr. Jones. You try to get a glimpse of this Sri Gupta, but he is an elusive figure, more a ghost in the historical record than a flesh and blood king. The primary evidence for his existence comes from the inscriptions of his own great-grandson, who proudly lists him as the dynasty's founder. You learn he holds the title of Maharaja, or Great King. Well, that sounds impressive. You quickly realize that in this fragmented era, titles are handed out like participation trophies. A Maharaj might rule a vast territory, or he might just control a few dozen villages and a well-fortified town. It's a mainstream historical fact that Sri Gupta's title likely signified him as a feudatory lord, a vassal ruling on behalf of a larger, now fading power, rather than a supreme sovereign. He was more of a successful regional manager than a CEO. The origins of his family are shrouded in mystery, a fertile ground for speculation. Historians still debate the precise social origins of the Gupta family, with theories suggesting they belonged to the Vaishya caste of merchants and farmers, or perhaps even the priestly Brahmin caste. This ambiguity is telling. They weren't part of an ancient, established warrior aristocracy. They were likely up-and-comers, a family with wealth, acumen, and a hunger for more. Their power wasn't inherited from a divine ancestor. It was being built, brick by brick, through shrewd management and sheer force of will. You imagine Sri Gupta not as a bejeweled king on a towering throne, but as a pragmatic landowner, meticulously managing his estates, securing trade routes, and making sure the granaries were full. The foundation of an empire isn't always laid with a sword. Sometimes it starts with good accounting. Digging deeper, you unearth a quirky little tidbit that hints at their early sophistication. A Chinese Buddhist pilgrim named Yijing, writing centuries later, mentioned a temple near a place called Mi-Li-Kier-Po-No. He noted that it had been built by a king named Chalikitu, a name scholars have painstakingly reconstructed as Srigupti specifically, for the use of traveling Chinese monks. If true, this is a fascinating detail. Long before they were a major power, the Guptas were already engaging in a form of international diplomacy, recognizing the importance of religion and trade routes that stretched far beyond their own borders. They weren't just thinking about the next village. They were thinking about China. You watch as the mantle of leadership passes from father to son. The next in line is Gatotkaca, another name that feels more suited to a mythological hero than a historical king. Like his father, he carries the title of Maharaja. He seems to be a carbon copy of his dad. Practical, effective, and not overly flashy. You see him not on a battlefield, but in a courtyard, overseeing the training of his small but disciplined army. You see him poring over tax records, ensuring the state has a steady income. He is If Sri Gupta laid the foundation, Gatotkaca is the one who puts up the walls and makes sure they are solid. He strengthens their hold on Magadha, securing its borders and building up a treasury. There are no grand conquests yet, no declarations of empire. That would be foolish, premature. It's a slow, patient game of chess they're playing, while their neighbors are engaged in chaotic games of checkers. As Gatotkaca's reign continues, you sense a change in the atmosphere. The Gupta territory feels different from the lands around it. It is more stable, more prosperous, The roads are better maintained. The markets are safer. Their little kingdom is becoming a magnet for merchants and talented artisans seeking security. The ambition, once a quiet family affair, is becoming more palpable. They are no longer content to be just another Maharaja. They are looking at the bigger picture. Their gaze is turning toward their powerful neighbors, not with spears, but with a more strategic weapon in mind. You hear whispers in the court, not of war, but of a marriage proposal. A union with an old and incredibly prestigious clan. This won't be a marriage of love. It will be a marriage of alliance. A move so clever it will transform their respectable little kingdom into a true, burgeoning empire. The air in the Gupta court is electric with a new kind of energy. The era of quiet consolidation under Sri Gupta and Ghatokacha is over. The new man in charge is Ghatokacha's son, and you can tell immediately that he is cut from a different cloth. His name is Chandragupta, a name that deliberately echoes the great founder of the Mauryan Empire, Chandragupta Maurya. This is no coincidence. It's a statement of intent. Where his father and grandfather were content with the title of Maharaja, this Chandragupta history will call him Chandragupta. Eye has a fire in his eyes. He walks, not like a regional king, but like an emperor surveying lands he already believes are his. He carries the ambition of his family not as a patient burden, but as a blazing torch. And he directs that fire not towards a bloody war, but towards a brilliant act of political theater. His own wedding. The bride is no ordinary princess. She is Kumaradavi, a daughter of the Lakavi clan. To understand the significance of this, you must understand who the Lakovis are. They aren't just some neighboring kingdom. They are an ancient and immensely prestigious republican clan. A warrior aristocracy who claim a lineage stretching back to the time of the Buddha himself. They have blue blood, old money, and a fierce pride. While the Guptas have methodically built their wealth and power, the Laikavas have something the Guptas crave. Unquestionable aristocratic legitimacy. The fact that they were an oligarchical republic, not a monarchy, makes this union a fascinatingly quirky political maneuver, a merger between a rising kingdom and an old-school corporate board of warrior princes. You managed to get a vantage point to watch the wedding festivities unfold, and it is a spectacle for the ages. The Gupta capital is awash in color and sound. Banners displaying the Gupta eagle fly alongside the emblems of the Lakavi Confederacy. The scent of jasmine, marigolds, and sandalwood incense hangs heavy in the air. You see Gupta officials, practical and sharp-eyed, mingling with haughty Lakavi elders. They're bearing aristocratic and proud. There are smiles and pleasantries everywhere, but beneath the surface, you can feel the tectonic plates of power shifting. This is a negotiation wrapped in a ceremony. Kumaradavi, draped in brilliant red silks and adorned with gold, meets Chandragupta, who looks every bit the aspiring emperor. Their union isn't just personal. It is the physical embodiment of a pact that will change the face of India. This marriage is the single most important political act of Chandragupta, the first's reign. A mainstream historical fact that cannot be overstated. It is with this one alliance, he gains control over the Lakovia's ancestral lands, which include the strategically vital city of Vaishali and crucial trade routes. Along the river Ganges, he gains access to their armies and their wealth. But most importantly, he gains their name. His descendants will proudly boast of their Lakavi blood, using it as a stamp of legitimacy to rule over other, older royal families. Historians still argue whether this was a true union of equals, or if the Guptas had already asserted military dominance, and the marriage was simply a way to gracefully absorb the Lakovis into their growing state. The answer is likely somewhere in between, a complex blend of force and diplomacy. The change is immediate. Shortly after securing this alliance, Chandragupta sheds the humble title of his forefathers. He is no longer a mere Maharaja. He adopts the grand, Persian-influenced title of Maharaja Dhiratha, Great King of Kings. It's a seismic declaration, an unambiguous claim to imperial status. He is announcing to the fragmented world of northern India that the time of petty kingdoms is over. A new paramount power has arrived. He even issues a series of beautiful gold coins to commemorate the event. On one side, you see him and Kumara Devi standing together, their names clearly inscribed. On the reverse, the goddess Durga sits astride a lion, and crucially, the legend reads Likavia. The Likaviyas. He isn't erasing their identity, he's broadcasting it, leveraging their prestige for his own imperial project. It's a public relations campaign stamped in gold. His accession to the throne, around 319 CE, is deemed so momentous that it marks the official beginning of the Gupta era, a new calendar that will be used by his dynasty and other kingdoms for centuries to come. He has not just founded a kingdom, he has founded an age. The patient work of his father and grandfather has paid off. They built the engine, he has just turned the key and put his foot on the accelerator. As you stand in the bustling capital, you realize you are witnessing the precise moment of creation. The Gupta kingdom has officially become the Gupta Empire, and as Chandragupta I and Queen Kumara Devi begin their new life together, they will raise a son who will inherit their combined ambition and military might. A son who will not be content with a title. He will want the whole world. The imperial court you have grown accustomed to is once again in a state of quiet tension. Chandragupta, he is aging. His hair is streaked with silver, his steps less certain. He has forged an empire through a brilliant alliance, but now it must be held together by force and will. He has several sons, but in the hush of the assembly hall, he makes his choice clear. He points to one of them, a man radiating an almost terrifying intensity, and declares, "You are worthy to rule the whole world." That son is Samadra. He watches his brothers' faces fall, their hopes turning to ash. This is no gentle passing of the torch. It's a deliberate selection of the sharpest, most ruthless tool for the job ahead. And as Samaragupta ascends the throne, you can feel the entire subcontinent hold its breath. The age of diplomacy is over. The age of the sword has begun. You are swept up in the whirlwind. The Gupta army, already a disciplined force, is honed into a razor's edge. You find yourself marching in a seemingly endless column of soldiers, the dust kicked up by thousands of sandals and chariot wheels coating your tongue. The imperial standard, a golden eagle or Garuda, glints in the merciless sun, a terrifying sight for the patchwork of smaller kingdoms that lie in its path. Samudragupta's strategy is methodical and brutal. His first target is his own backyard, the northern heartland of Aryavarta. He is not here to negotiate. He is here to unify. You witness the swift and violent uprooting of the rival kings you remember from your earlier travels, including the serpent-descended Naga kings. Their armies are smashed, their capitals sacked, their territories absorbed directly into the growing empire. There is no mercy here. This is a policy of extermination for any rival power in the Gangetic Plain. Then, the army turns south. The march towards Dakshinapatha, the Great Southern Road, is an epic undertaking. The landscape changes from fertile plains to dense forests and rocky plateaus. The air grows thick and heavy. Here Samudragupta's genius shifts from that of a blunt instrument to that of a grand chess master. He knows he cannot possibly rule these distant lands directly. The supply lines are too long, the cultures too different, so he embarks on a campaign of shock and awe. You watch as his army descends upon a dozen southern kingdoms, defeating their kings in battle, capturing their fabulous wealth of gold and gems. But then comes the brilliant twist. He releases the captive kings. He returns their crowns and their lands. In exchange, they must acknowledge him as their overlord, pay a hefty annual tribute, and offer their daughters in marriage to the Gupta court. It's a stunningly effective piece of foreign policy. He gains all the benefits of conquest wealth, resources, and security on his southern flank without any of the administrative headaches. This whole grand strategy is meticulously documented in a mainstream historical source that you get to see for yourself. In the city of Prayaga, at the sacred confluence of the Ganges and Yamuna rivers, stands one of those ancient Mauryan pillars you saw when you first arrived. Samudragupta has commissioned his court poet Rishina to carve a glowing account of his conquests directly onto its surface. You watch the stonemasons at work, chipping away to create a record for eternity. The inscription, a long and flowing panegyric in the most elegant Sanskrit, lists all the vanquished kings and subjugated peoples, a testament to Samudragupta's absolute power. Yet, there is another side to this man. One evening, after a long day's march, you hear a sound drifting from the royal tent. It's not the clang of swords or the bark of orders, but the delicate, complex melody of a veena, a tipa flute. This is a quirky, yet famous, aspect of his character. The great conqueror, the man they call the exterminator of all other kings, is also an accomplished musician and a sensitive poet, earning him the title Kaviraja, or King of Poets. Some of his gold coins even depict him casually seated, playing the instrument. It's a startling contradiction. The hands that can command the slaughter of an entire army can also coax a heartbreaking melody from a few taut strings. As the years of campaigning blur into one another, you see the map of India being redrawn by his will. The frontier kingdoms in Bengal and Nepal, and the tribal republics in Punjab and Rajasthan see the writing on the wall. They don't even wait to be attacked. Their envoys arrive at the camp, bearing gifts and offering fealty. Historians still argue about the precise timeline of these campaigns, whether they were a single, non-stop blitz or a series of coordinated wars spread over decades. To you, marching on the ground, it feels like one relentless storm. When the dust finally settles, Samudragupta stands as the undisputed master of the subcontinent. To celebrate this fact and declare his universal sovereignty to the gods and men, he performs the ancient and incredibly prestigious Ashvamedha, the sacred horse sacrifice. An imperial stallion is set loose to wander for a year, its path followed by the army, and any king who dares to stop it invites his own destruction. No one does. The horse returns, the ritual is completed, and Samudragupta's power is absolute. The empire is forged. Now, it must be ruled. The great horse sacrifice is complete, and a new kind of quiet settles over the empire. The relentless drumbeat of Samudragupta's campaigns has faded, replaced by the steady hum of a realm at peace, a territory so vast and secure that its borders are almost theoretical to those living in its heartland. The conqueror's son now sits on the throne. His name is Chandragupta II, and you watch him as he surveys the empire he has inherited. He has his father's steel. You can see it in his eyes, but it is tempered with a different quality of politicians, cunning and a connoisseur's taste. He understands that an empire forged in fire must be held together by something more than just fear. It needs prosperity. It needs a culture so brilliant that it becomes the envy of the world. His first major act isn't a war, but a familiar Gupta power move. A marriage. You remember the master stroke of his great-grandfather, who married the Lakavi princess, Chandragupta, to look south, to the powerful Vakataka kingdom in the Deccan Plateau. He doesn't invade. Instead, he offers his own daughter, Prabhahabhukta, in marriage to their king. You witness the elaborate procession as the Gupta princess travels south, a living embodiment of an alliance that effectively turns a powerful neighbor into a vassal state. It's a genius move. When the Vakataka king dies unexpectedly a few years later, Prabhagupta rules as regent for her young sons, and by extension, her father, Chandragupta II, has immense influence over a huge swath of central India, all without shedding a single drop of Gupta blood, with his southern flank secured by this diplomatic masterstroke. He turns his gaze west. Here lies the one piece of unfinished business that has vexed his ancestors. The kingdom of the western set. These rulers, descended from the Scythian Saka tribes, have controlled the wealthy ports of Gujarat for centuries, dominating the lucrative sea trade with the Roman and Persian worlds. They are a formidable, lingering power. This campaign becomes Chandragupta II's defining military achievement, a mainstream historical fact that cements his legacy. You see the Gupta war machine roar back to life. But this is no quick raid. It is a long, grinding war that lasts 4 years. Finally, after a series of hard-fought battles, the last Soka king is defeated and killed. The Gupta Eagle's standard now flies over the bustling western ports. The economic impact is immediate and staggering. The floodgates of international trade are thrown open. Suddenly, the markets in the Gupta heartland are filled with exotic goods from Alexandria and beyond, and Gupta spices, textiles, and precious stones flow out to the world. Gold and silver pour into the imperial treasury. To mark this monumental victory, Chandragupta too adopts a new title, one that will echo through Indian legend for 1,000 years. Vikramaditya, the son of prowess. It is a name synonymous with power, justice, and splendor. And here you stumble upon a fascinating scholarly debate. For centuries, Indian folklore has been filled with tales of a heroic king named Vik, a model ruler who was a great patron of the arts and possessed supernatural wisdom. Historians still argue whether this legendary figure was Chandragupta II himself, or perhaps a later king who took on the famous title, or if the legend is a composite of several great rulers. But as you stand in his court, watching him dispense justice and welcome poets and scholars, it's easy to see how the man could become the myth. Under his patronage, the court at Pataliput and his new western capital at Ujjain becomes the glittering epicenter of a cultural renaissance. This is where the quirky and romantic legend of the Navaratnas, the 9 gems of his court, is born. While likely a later tradition, the story captures the spirit of the age. It imagines 9 of the most brilliant minds in India, all gathered under his patronage. The poet Kalidasa, the astronomer Varahamihira, the physician Dhanvantari, and others. You see scholars engaged in heated debates in quiet gardens, playwrights rehearsing their new works, and mathematicians scrawling complex formulas on wooden boards. Vikramaditya doesn't just tolerate this intellectual ferment. He actively encourages it, showering the brightest minds with gold and recognition. The empire's safe, the treasury is full, and now the human mind is being set free to explore the universe, to compose the most beautiful poetry, and to capture the divine in stone and bronze. The golden age is no longer a promise. You are living in it. The glittering court of Vikramaditya is a dazzling place, but it's an inside view. You've seen the empire from the perspective of the powerful. Now, you get to see it through the eyes of a complete outsider. A man on a mission that has nothing to do with conquest or gold. You find yourself tagging along with a rather unlikely tourist. A Chinese Buddhist monk named Faxian. He's a quiet, determined man in his 60s, his face weathered by the wind and sun of an impossibly long journey. He has walked from central China, across the terrifying land of death that is the Taklamakan Desert, and over the bone-chillingly high passes of the Pamir Mountains. It's a trip that makes a modern-day budget airline flight look like a luxury cruise. His goal isn't to see the emperor or marvel at the army. He is a pilgrim, driven by a powerful need to find original Buddhist scriptures, the authentic texts of the faith, to take back to his homeland. As you journey with him into the heart of the Gupta domain around the year 405 CE, the contrast between the world he left behind and the one he enters is profound. The first thing that strikes you, and him, is the peace. It's not just a lack of war. It's a deep, pervasive sense of order and security. This observation, recorded in his famous travelogue, is a mainstream historical fact that provides one of the best contemporary accounts of the era. You travel along well-maintained roads, dotted with rest houses for travelers. There are no bandits lurking in the woods, no checkpoints demanding bribes every few miles. People go about their business with a calm that speaks volumes. For Faxian, who has just survived some of the most dangerous terrain on Earth, this must feel like paradise. You follow him through bustling towns and fertile farmlands. He notes that the common people are prosperous and content. The government, he writes, is remarkably lenient. There's no need for a visa, no grumpy border guards, no filling out forms in triplicate. The administration seems to run with a light touch. He's amazed that the state revenues are drawn mainly from a reasonable percentage of the land's produce. A system so straightforward it would make a modern tax accountant weep with either joy or boredom. Punishments for crimes are usually just fines. Capital punishment is extremely rare, and he reports a near total absence of the brutal corporal punishments common in other parts of the world. It's the ancient equivalent of a government that just works quietly and efficiently in the background. But Faxian's devout Buddhist eyes also pick up on details that reveal the complexities of this golden age. He notes with approval that the majority of the population is vegetarian, shunning meat, onions, and garlic, and that they do not keep pigs or fowl. He is deeply impressed by the charitable institutions, particularly in the grand capital city of Pat. There, you see him visit a magnificent hospital, endowed by wealthy citizens, where the poor, the destitute, and the sick can receive medical care completely free of charge. You see physicians calmly diagnosing ailments and dispensing herbal remedies, a testament to a society that values compassion. Yet, you also encounter a quirky and jarring detail that shows the rigid social stratification beneath the peaceful surface. As you enter a town, you hear a sharp, rhythmic clack. Faxian points out a group of people, the Chandalas, or untouchables. He explains that according to the law, they are required to strike a piece of wood as they walk, to warn others of their approach, so that higher caste individuals can avoid making contact with them. It's a chilling moment of social reality that complicates the idyllic picture. Historians still argue whether Faxian's account, filtered through his devout Buddhist perspective, might have romanticized the society, perhaps downplaying conflicts or focusing only on the aspects of piety and charity that impressed him most. He was, after all, a pilgrim, not a political analyst, and his narrative naturally focuses on the flourishing Buddhist monasteries and the kindness he received. For years, you stay with him in Pataliputra, where he finally finds what he's been looking for. You watch him in the quiet halls of a monastery library, a world away from the imperial court, as he painstakingly learns Sanskrit and copies the precious manuscripts of the Buddhist law. His single-minded dedication is awe-inspiring. His journey provides an invaluable snapshot of the Gupta Empire at its absolute zenith, a land of unparalleled peace, prosperity, and intellectual ferment, yet one still bound by ancient and unyielding social rules. While the quiet monk Faxian is lost in his world of sacred scrolls, you decide to step out of the monastery's peaceful cloisters and truly immerse yourself in the city he so admires. Pataliputra. The name itself feels heavy with history. This isn't some new, purpose-built imperial capital. It's an ancient metropolis, the same city that served as the capital for the Mauryan emperors more than 600 years before. As you walk its streets, you can feel the layers of time beneath your feet. It sits majestically on the southern bank of the great river Ganges, a strategic location that makes it the nexus of commerce and power for the entire Gangetic plain. The city is enormous, a sprawling rectangle of civilization enclosed by what you can still see are the remains of a truly massive wooden palisade, punctuated by dozens of gates. The grand architecture of the Gupta era is everywhere. You see elegant brick temples with gracefully curved spires, multi-storied houses belonging to wealthy merchants, their wooden balconies intricately carved, and wide, well-paved central avenues. But the crown jewel, the heart of the empire, is the royal palace. You can't get inside, of course. The guards in their polished armor make that abundantly clear, but you can stand outside and marvel at its scale and beauty. It's set within a vast park, filled with fountains and man-made hills. The structure itself is a masterpiece of stone and woodwork. In fact, you recall the pilgrim Faxian whispering in awe that the stonework of the palace was so exquisite, the carvings so impossibly detailed, that it couldn't possibly be the work of human hands. It must, he concluded, have been built by spirits summoned by the great Emperor Ashoka centuries ago. This belief, a wonderfully quirky blend of awe and folklore, persists among the city's inhabitants, adding a layer of myth to the emperor's power. You leave the grandeur of the imperial district and dive into the city's vibrant commercial heart. The markets are a chaotic symphony for the senses. The air is thick with the scent of cardamom, cloves, and roasting grains, mixed with the sharper smells of horse dung and human sweat. You see merchants from every corner of the empire and beyond. A sun-darkened man from the south haggles over a bag of black pepper, its value almost equal to that of gold. A merchant in a silk turban, just arrived from one of the newly acquired western ports, displays a small chest of Roman glassware. You see stalls overflowing with brilliant cotton textiles, finely wrought gold jewelry, ivory carvings, and pottery of all shapes and sizes. It's a bit overwhelming, and you have to politely decline the services of a man trying to sell you a guaranteed lucky mongoose claw. the ancient equivalent of a street corner hustler with a get-rich-quick scheme. Beyond the commerce, you see the civic institutions that make Pataliputra the envy of the world. You find your way back to that remarkable hospital you saw with Faxian. This is a mainstream historical fact, a detail that speaks volumes about the society. You watch as a physician gently examines a child's fever, while an assistant grinds herbs with a mortar and pestle. The care is organized, compassionate, and available to everyone, regardless of their ability to pay. The city is also a major center of learning, filled with viharas, Buddhist monasteries, and Brahmanical schools, where young men study everything from grammar and logic to medicine and mathematics. As you wander, you notice something fascinating about the city's structure. You see the elegant Gupta brickwork, but in some places, you see it built upon or alongside colossal stone foundations of a much older, grander scale. It dawns on you that you are witnessing a great historical debate in physical form. Historians still argue whether the Gupta Pataliputra was a completely new city built on old ruins, or a grand-scale refurbishment of the even larger Mauryan metropolis that stood on the same spot. It feels like the latter. It seems the Guptas, for all their power, were practical. They didn't demolish the past. They built upon it, weaving their own golden age into the fabric of an even more ancient history. The city is a living palimpsest, a scroll that has been written on, partially erased, and written on again. It is the perfect symbol of the Gupta dynasty itself, new, vibrant, and brilliant, but deeply rooted in the ancient soil of India. It is the beating heart of an empire at the peak of its confidence. You decide to leave the urban sprawl of Pataliputra behind, journeying out into the countryside where the true heart of the empire beats. The peace established by the emperors means travel is easy, and you soon find yourself drawn toward the rhythmic chink-chink of hammers striking stone. In a clearing bathed in the warm, golden light of late afternoon, you see a revolution taking shape in sandstone. For centuries, the grandest sacred spaces were caves, painstakingly carved out of living rock, or structures made of wood and brick that have long since returned to the earth. But here, you are witnessing the birth of something new, the emergence of the freestanding, purpose-built Hindu stone temple. This architectural innovation is a defining and mainstream feature of the Golden Age. It's not a massive, sprawling complex. By latest standards, the building rising before you is modest, almost jewel-like in its proportions. It consists of a small, square, central chamber, the Garbhagriha, or womb house. It's a dark, intimate space, designed to house the image of the deity. The walls are thick, the ceiling is flat, and there is only one beautifully carved doorway. In front of it, a small covered porch, or mandapa, is supported by elegantly carved pillars. It's a simple, powerful design, a sacred cave given architectural form and placed in the open air. It's a bit more complicated than assembling a flat-pack bookshelf from IKEA, and you get the feeling the divine instructions the master architect received were probably just as cryptic. You walk around the structure, watching the artisans at work. This is where the Gupta genius truly shines. The plain, solid walls of the temple are being transformed into a canvas for the gods. You see a master sculptor, his body lean and dusted with pink stone, working on a large relief panel. He isn't just chipping away. He seems to be releasing a figure that was already trapped inside the stone. The result is breathtaking. You see a statue of Vishnu, not as a terrifying, wrathful god, but as a being of serene grace and cosmic calm. His body is perfectly proportioned. His face has a gentle, all-knowing smile. His ornaments are carved with exquisite, lace-like detail. The figures seem to breathe. Their stone drapery looks so thin and soft, you feel you could almost lift it with your fingers. This is the hallmark of the Gupta style, a perfect balance between earthly beauty and divine transcendence. As you gaze at the finished sculptures, you find yourself in the middle of a great scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the defining characteristic of Gupta art is its idealism or its realism. The sculptures are not portraits of actual people. There are no wrinkles, scars, or imperfections. Every figure is a perfected, idealized version of a human or a god. Yet, there is a naturalism to the poses, a softness to the modeling of the bodies that feels incredibly lifelike. The artists have mastered human anatomy, not to show its flaws, but to transcend them, creating a vision of divine perfection in a recognizably human form. Your travels eventually lead you to a different kind of artistic marvel, one born not of stone, but of fire and metal. Near the area that will one day become Delhi, you see a strange and wondrous object standing in a temple courtyard. It's a pillar, about 24 feet tall, made not of stone, but a solid, dark iron. This is the famous Iron Pillar of Delhi. You run your hand over its surface. It's surprisingly smooth, with only the faintest texture. The quirky and astounding thing about it is its condition. It was forged some time ago in honor of a king very, likely your acquaintance, Chandragupta II, and has been standing exposed to the wind and rain ever since. Yet, it shows almost no signs of rust. It's a metallurgical masterpiece, a testament to the advanced scientific knowledge of Gupta blacksmiths who managed to create an iron alloy of such astonishing purity and durability that modern science has only recently been able to fully explain it. You look at the pillar, a simple, unadorned column of metal, and you realize it is as profound a work of art as any sculpted god. It is a symbol of the Empire's power, permanence, and hidden genius. The Golden Age isn't just about beautiful things. It's about making impossible things real. The gleaming Russell's iron pillar you saw was not a miracle. It was the product of a mind, of centuries of accumulated knowledge in chemistry and the serene beauty of a Vishnu sculpture is not just art. It is applied geometry, a deep understanding of proportion and balance. You realize that the visible splendor of this golden age is just the surface. The real engine is invisible. It is the worry, brilliant, and sometimes shockingly audacious world of the Gupta intellect. To find it, you leave the temples and forges, and seek out the quiet courtyards of a vihara, or a Brahmanical academy in the great city of Ujjain. Here, the air doesn't smell of incense, but of drying palm leaves and ink. The only sound is the quiet scratching of a metal stylus on leaf, and the low, intense murmur of debate. You find a place to sit, unnoticed, and listen to a lecture being given by a man whose name is whispered with a mixture of reverence and controversy. He is a compact man, with eyes that seem to be looking at a point a million miles away. What you are hearing him propose is, by the standards of your time, pure heresy. He calmly explains to his students that the nightly procession of the stars across the sky is an illusion. It is not the heavens that are moving, he argues, but the earth itself that is spinning on its own axis, like a potter's wheel. You can feel the uncomfortable shifting in the room. To suggest the solid ground beneath your feet is in constant, dizzying motion is a profound conceptual leap. This is a mainstream historical fact, one of the most brilliant insights of the ancient world. He goes further. Armed with diagrams drawn in the dust, he talks about eclipses. The ancient story, the one everyone knows, is that a fearsome demon named Rahu periodically tries to swallow the sun or the moon. But Aryabhata dismisses this with a wave of his hand. An eclipse, he explains, with chalk-dusted fingers, is merely a shadow. The Earth's shadow falling on the moon, or the moon's shadow falling on the Earth. It's a moment of pure, unadulterated science, and you can almost hear a collective gasp as 1,000 years of mythology is swept away by simple, elegant geometry. It's a bit like someone not only giving you a spoiler for a cosmic horror movie, but also explaining the boring camera tricks used to make the monster. His work, which will be compiled in a book called the Aryabhasiya, is a masterclass in mathematics. He calculates the length of the solar year to 365.3586805 days. A figure so astonishingly accurate that it's only a few minutes off from modern scientific calculations. He calculates the value of PIA to 3.1416. But his greatest contribution, the one that will truly change the world, is his work with numbers themselves. You watch as a student works on a complex problem, using a system of 9 number symbols and a 10th revolutionary concept, a dot or a small circle to represent nothing. Shunya, the void. 0, this is the intellectual cornerstone of the era. For centuries, people had used placeholders in their counting boards, but the Guptas and the thinkers they patronized are the ones who turned nothing into something. They gave 0 its own identity as a number you could add, subtract, and multiply with. This single concept unlocks the magic of the decimal place value system. making complex calculations the kind you need to predict an eclipse or design a temple infinitely easier. Historians still argue about the precise evolutionary path of zero, with some evidence from earlier manuscripts suggesting the concept was brewing for a while. But it is undeniably in the Gupta era that it is systemized, formalized, and launched into the intellectual mainstream. But the genius is not just in the stars and numbers. You wander into another part of the academy, where a teacher is reading from a much older text, the Sushruta, a foundational work on medicine and surgery that was being revised and expanded in this era. You listen utterly captivated as he describes medical procedures of stunning complexity. He details how to set fractures, how to perform cataract surgery by pushing the lens of the eye out of the field of vision with a special needle, and, most astoundingly, how to perform rhinoplasty, a nose job. The text gives precise instructions on how to reconstruct a nose using a flap of skin taken from the patient's forehead. This is the quirky, almost unbelievable tidbit. In an age without anesthesia or antibiotics, surgeons were performing cosmetic and reconstructive surgery with a sophisticated understanding of human anatomy. It makes you look at the serene, perfectly proportioned faces on the temple statues in a whole new light. The Golden Age wasn't just an ideal, they had the surgical skill to try and create it. The heady atmosphere of pure intellect, of numbers and stars, begins to feel thin. You leave the scholars to their cosmic calculations and find yourself drawn back toward the gravitational center of the empire, the royal court. The moment you step into the outer halls of the palace, the world changes. The air itself feels different, heavier, scented with a complex and expensive perfume of sandalwood, camphor, and blooming jasmine. The quiet of the academy is replaced by a soundscape of rustling silk, the soft clink of gold bangles, and the most dangerous sound of all, whispering, "You've entered the glittering, treacherous ecosystem, where power is not just held, but performed daily." Your simple travel clothes, practical for dusty roads and monastic libraries, suddenly feel impossibly coarse. Everyone around you is a living sculpture. The courtiers, the sophisticated men about town known as Nagaraka, move with a practiced, languid grace. Their bodies are draped in impossibly fine muslin from Bengal, a fabric so sheer it was sometimes called woven air. Their lips are stained a fashionable dark red from chewing betel nut with lime and spices, a mild stimulant that acts as a social lubricant, the ancient equivalent of a perpetual coffee meeting. Their dark hair is grown long and styled in elaborate curls and top knots, held in place with jeweled pins. This intense focus on personal grooming, a quirky and fascinating aspect of the high life, extends to the art of perfumery. Wealthy individuals don't just wear one scent. They have custom-blended perfumes for different times of day, different seasons, and even different parts of their body. You find a position to observe the Emperor of Ikomaditya holding his daily public audience, or Derbar. He is not the remote, godlike figure you might imagine. He sits on a low, ornate throne, but he is accessible. You watch as ministers and secretaries present him with scrolls detailing the affairs of the empire. This is the administrative machinery in action, a mainstream historical fact of Gupta governance. The empire is meticulously organized into provinces Bhuktas, which are further divided into districts of Ishayas, each with its own governor and bureaucracy. You listen as reports come in. Tax collections from the western ports, a dispute over irrigation rights in a northern province, a request to fund a new monastery in the east. The emperor listens patiently, asks sharp questions, and delivers his judgment with a quiet authority. It's less like a scene of epic grandeur and more like a high-stakes board meeting for a massive multinational corporation. Life here is governed by an unwritten but ironclad code of etiquette. The way you bow, the way you address a superior, the exact moment you are permitted to speak, every gesture is freighted with meaning. A misplaced word or a glance held too long can have consequences. It's a world of exquisite politeness, layered over a bedrock of brutal hierarchy. Making an off-color joke here would be like starting a food fight at a state dinner. The fallout would be swift and merciless. As you watch the subtle dance of deference and influence, you see the queen, the Mahadavi, seated near the emperor. She is adorned in magnificent jewels and silks, picture of serene beauty and royal grace. But her presence brings to mind a great scholarly question. Historians still argue whether the chief queen in the Gupta court wielded genuine political power or was merely a revered, but ultimately symbolic figure. The example of Chandragupta II's own daughter, Prabhavati Gupta, who effectively ruled the Vakataka kingdom as regent, suggests that royal women could be formidable political players. Yet, the day-to-day business of the court seems to be an exclusively male domain. The longer you stay, the more you realize that the pleasantries are a veneer. Beneath the surface, the court is a hotbed of intrigue. You see two ministers smiling warmly at each other as they pass, yet you just overheard one of them quietly discrediting the other in a conversation with the royal secretary. Alliances are constantly shifting. Reputations are built and destroyed in whispers. Everyone is jockeying for the emperor's favor, for a more prestigious appointment, for a larger grant of land. The emperor, you realize, must be a master of reading people, of sifting truth from flattery. He likely has his own network of spies, the Guptas, who move silently through the palace and the city, their ears open, reporting back on any hint of conspiracy or dissent. It is a golden cage, an opulent world of immense privilege, but also one of suffocating pressure, where the slightest misstep can mean a swift and silent fall from grace. The stifling elegance of the court, with its perfumed air and whispered plots, eventually gives way to the cool of the evening. The tension of the day dissolves as the sun sets, and a different kind of excitement begins to build. Tonight, you are not here for politics or administration. You are here for pure entertainment. You follow a procession of finely dressed courtiers out into a large, open-air courtyard within the palace complex. Torches have been lit, their flames flickering and casting long, dancing shadows. A temporary stage has been erected at one end, simple in its construction but rich in its potential. There is no elaborate scenery, no grand set. The magic, you will soon learn, is to be woven from words and gestures alone. You find a seat on one of the cushioned mats laid out for the audience. The murmur of the crowd is one of pleasant anticipation. This isn't the hushed, almost reverential silence of a modern theater. People are socializing, sharing spiced wine, and dissecting the day's events. You get the feeling that if someone's phone went off here, they wouldn't be shushed. They'd just be mercilessly gossiped about for the next 6 months. The main attraction tonight is a new work by the man they are all talking about, a playwright and poet of such sublime skill that he is already a living legend. His name is Kalidasa. Trying to find out more about him is a frustrating exercise. He is at once everywhere and nowhere. His poetry is on everyone's lips, but the man himself is a phantom. This is a great, unresolved puzzle for the ages. Historians still argue whether Kalidasa was a court poet for your host, Chandragupta II, or perhaps a later Gupta king. Some even place him in a different century entirely. His personal history is a complete blank, a vacuum that later storytellers would fill with all sorts of fantastic tales of him being a simple-minded rustic who was granted divine poetic genius by the goddess Kali. As you sit waiting for the play to begin, you realize his anonymity is part of his power. His work stands on its own, untethered to a celebrity persona. The performance begins. There is no grand curtain rising. Instead, after a series of ritual preliminaries, a beautifully painted cloth, the Yavanika, is held up by 2 stagehands. The actors make their entrance from behind it, and the story begins. The play is a romantic tale, a form of drama known as Anat. The one you are watching tonight is his masterpiece, Abhijnana Sakuntalam, or the recognition of Shakuntala. The story is one of love, loss, and memory, of a king who falls for a beautiful forest-dwelling girl, marries her in secret, but then forgets her entirely due to a hermit's curse. The mainstream historical fact is that this kind of sophisticated, secular drama, written in a mixture of elegant Sanskrit for the noble characters and more common Prakrit dialects for others, reached its absolute zenith during the Gupta period. The peace and wealth of the empire created a discerning audience and the patronage system to support artists of Kalidasa's caliber. You are completely captivated. The actors use a highly stylized system of gestures, expressions, and movements. a coded language that conveys emotion far more powerfully than shouting or weeping ever could. When the heroine Shakuntala is pining for her lost love, her sorrow is not shown with messy tears, but with a graceful, precise choreography of despair that is heartbreakingly beautiful. Kalidasa's poetry, recited by the actors, is the true star. His descriptions of nature are so vivid you can almost smell the lotuses in the forest pond. His metaphors are so perfect and unexpected they make the audience sigh with pleasure. As the story unfolds, you realize a quirky but fundamental rule of this theatrical universe. It is designed to end happily. The genre itself dictates that all conflicts must be resolved, order must be restored, and the main characters must be the Sanskrit word for it is Sukhinta, ending with happiness. There are no grim tragedies here, no plays that leave you feeling emotionally wrecked. Imagine Romeo and Juliet, but instead of the tragic mix-up, Friar Lawrence's message gets delivered on time, and everyone has a good laugh about the misunderstanding over a celebratory feast. The purpose of drama here is not to depict the bleakness of the human condition, but to lead the audience through a journey of turmoil, to a state of aesthetic and emotional bliss. Known as Rasa, as the play reaches its climax, and the king finally recognizes his beloved by means of a lost ring, a wave of collective joy and relief washes over the courtyard. The night ends not in cathartic sorrow, but in hintily smiling satisfaction. The refined, poetic world of Kalidasa's stage feels like a dream the next morning. You decide you need to see a different kind of art, something more monumental. More bisa. Your journey takes you south, away from the Gangetic heartland, into the rugged, volcanic rock of the Deccan Plateau. You have heard whispers of a project of breathtaking ambition, a series of man-made caves being carved into the side of a horseshoe-shaped gorge, a place that will one day be known as a jump. After a long and arduous trek, you arrive. The sight before you silences all thought. High on the cliff face, dark, gaping mouths have been cut into the solid rock. The entrances to a series of Buddhist monasteries, viharas, and prayer halls. Chatya, you join a team of workers, a small army of sculptors, plasterers, and painters. The first thing you notice is the sound. It's a deafening, percussive symphony of iron chisels striking unforgiving basalt rock. This isn't sculpture in the way you've seen it before, where a block of stone is brought to a workshop. Here, the workshop is the mountain itself. You watch as a team of men, their bodies lean and wiry, slowly and painstakingly hollow out a vast chamber. It's a mainstream historical fact that these rock-cut caves, sponsored by the wealthy Vakataka dynasty, very same rulers the Guptas so cleverly allied with through marriage, represent one of the crowning achievements of ancient Indian art and engineering. You venture into one of the finished caves. The transition from the blazing outdoor heat to the cool, echoing darkness is instantaneous and profound. It takes a moment for your eyes to adjust. As they do, the cave reveals itself. The pillars, the ceilings, even the statues of the Buddha and the central shrine at the back are not separate objects. They're all part of the original rock, immense sculptures that have been liberated from the mountain. The level of planning required is staggering. A single miscalculation, one crack in the wrong place, and a century of work could be ruined. It's the ultimate high-stakes art project, with no undo button. But the true magic, the reason you have come all this way, is not the sculpture. It's what covers the walls. In the dim light, you see that every surface, walls, ceilings, pillars is coated in a layer of fine plaster and then covered with the most astonishing paintings you have ever seen. This is the great treasure of Ajanta. The artists are working by the flickering, smoky light of oil lamps, a logistical challenge that makes their achievement even more miraculous. You watch a painter, his face a mask of concentration, as he mixes his mineral and plant-based pigments on a small stone palette. His brush, made from the fine hair of a squirrel's tail, moves with a fluid, confident grace. The paintings bring the whole world to life on these dark, subterranean walls. They depict the Jataka tales, stories of the Buddha's previous lives, but this is no simple, pious, comic strip. The artists have used these ancient tales as an excuse to paint the entire panorama of Gupta era life. You see bejeweled princes in their opulent palaces, their expressions ranging from haughty arrogance to lovesick melancholy. You see graceful court ladies with elaborate hairstyles, gossiping in a garden. You see bustling city streets, foreign sailors with strange beards, and serene forest hermitages. It is a visual encyclopedia of the age. Historians still argue about the exact techniques used to create these frescoes, debating whether they are true fresco painted on wet plaster or a form of tempera painted on dry plaster. To you, standing just inches from a face that was painted over 1,000 years ago, the technical term seems irrelevant. The result is pure life. As you gaze at one particularly famous panel, you see a bodhisattva, a being on the verge of enlightenment. His face is a perfect oval of serene compassion. He holds a lotus flower, his body swaying in a gentle, rhythmic pose. And then you notice a quirky detail. One of his eyebrows is arched in a slightly quizzical, almost flirtatious manner. A divine being is shown with a flicker of very human charm. It's this fusion of the spiritual and the worldly, the sacred and the sensuous, that makes the art of Ajanta so powerful. The paintings are not meant to be didactic lessons, but immersive experiences. They are designed to draw you in, to make you feel the richness of life, the beauty of the world, and then to gently guide your mind toward the serene, timeless presence of the Buddha waiting in the darkness of the shrine. It is art as a form of meditation, a silent sermon painted in shadow and light. You return from the sensuous painted caves of Ajanta, your mind filled with images of graceful bodhisattvas, elegant, courtly life. But as you re-enter the towns and villages of the Gupta heartland, you're forced to confront the scaffolding that holds this whole elaborate society up. It is a structure as rigid and as meticulously planned as a rock-cut temple, but it is made of people, not stone. This is the reality of the caste system, or Varna, the theoretical fourfold division of society that has been a part of Indian life for centuries, but which you now see being codified and solidified into an unyielding framework for daily life. The system, as the Brahmin priests and legal scholars explain it to you, is divinely ordained and beautifully simple. At the top are the Brahmins, the priests and intellectuals, who sprang from the mouth of the primordial creator god. They are the keepers of sacred knowledge, the advisors to kings. Below them are the Kshatriyas, the warriors and rulers, born from the creator's arms. Their duty is to protect the realm and wield power. Then come the Vaisyas, the merchants, farmers, and artisans, created from the god's thighs. They are the engine of the economy, the producers of wealth. Finally, there are the Shudras, the laborers and servants, born from the creator's feet, whose role is to serve the other three castes. This neat, four-part hierarchy is a mainstream historical fact, articulated with increasing clarity in the legal and religious texts of the Gupta period, most notably in the But as you move through society, you see that the reality is infinitely more complex. The four Varnas are more like broad categories than actual job descriptions. The real unit of social identity is the yati, a much smaller, localized, and often occupation-based You meet a potter, and you learn that his yati is different from the weavers, which is different from the goldsmiths. People marry within their yati, share meals with their yati, and find their place in the world through their yati. It's a vast, intricate web of thousands of distinct communities, each with its own customs and place in the pecking order. You see the prescribed roles for men and women play out in daily life. For a man of the upper castes, his life is ideally divided into 4 stages. The chaste student, the married householder, the forest dweller who begins to detach from worldly life, and finally, the wandering ascetic, who renounces everything. For a woman, her life is defined by her relationship to men, as a daughter to her father, a wife to her husband, and a mother to her sons. You watch a wedding ceremony, and it's clear that the primary duties of the wife are to manage the household and produce male heirs, to continue the family line. The love and romance you saw in Kalidasa's plays exist, certainly, but the foundation of marriage is duty, or dharma. And then there are the people who exist outside the fourfold system entirely. You remember them from your journey with Faxion, the Shandalas, the Untouchables, They are relegated to the most ritually impure tasks, such as handling dead bodies or tanning leather. They are forced to live in separate quarters on the outskirts of towns. The rules of purity and pollution that govern interactions between castes are incredibly strict. You see a high-caste Brahmin perform a complex purification ritual after his shadow is accidentally crossed by an untouchable. This rigid social stratification, with its deep-seated ideas of ritual purity, is a stark and uncomfortable contrast to the era's celebrated intellectual and artistic freedoms. This leads you to a quirky and fascinating aspect of the legal system. You get your hands on a translated section of the Narada Smriti, a law code from the period. It contains some surprisingly progressive ideas, such as recognizing the right of a woman to leave her husband under certain circumstances and remarry. Yet, the same text prescribes trial by ordeal for serious crimes. Where evidence is lacking, a suspected thief might be forced to carry a red-hot piece of iron if his hands are not burned. Is innocent. Historians still argue about how much these legal texts reflect the actual practice of law versus a Brahminical ideal of how society should be structured. Were these ordeals common, or were they a rare, last-ditch effort to solve an impossible case? The system is full of these contradictions. A society that produces sublime art and revolutionary mathematics is also one that enforces brutal social exclusion and believes a god will prevent a hot piece of metal from burning an innocent man. It is a world of genius and prejudice, living side. The intricate, ordered world of caste and dharma feels eternal, unshakable. You have been living in the long, peaceful autumn of the Golden Age. Chandragupta II, the great Vikramaditya, has long since passed, and the throne is now occupied by his son, Kumaragupta. The first, his reign is one of remarkable stability, lasting for 4 decades. The empire feels like a permanent feature of the landscape, a vast and self-assured institution. The machinery of state continues to run smoothly. The poets continue to write. The temples continue to be built. But you start to pick up on a new kind of whisper, not the courtly intrigue you've grown used to, but something carried on the dusty winds from the far northwest, from the mountain passages that are the traditional gateways for invasion. The whispers are about a people called the Hunas. The name is spoken with a unique mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. Merchants arriving on the trade caravans from Persia speak of them in hushed tones. They describe a nomadic people from the steppes of Central Asia, warriors who seem to be born on horseback. They don't fight in the ordered infantry lines, an elephant corps of a traditional Indian army. They're a swirling, chaotic mass of mounted archers who can fire their powerful composite bows in any direction, even while galloping away from you. They are, you hear, less an army and more a natural disaster, a human hurricane that sweeps over settled civilizations, leaving devastation in its wake. This is the Indian front of a global phenomenon. Historians still debate the exact relationship between these Indian Hunas, often called the Hephalites, or White Huns. The Huns who terrified Rome under Attila, and the fierce Xiongnu tribes mentioned in ancient Chinese records. Are they the same people, a related branch, a successor confederation? The answer is lost to the tangled genealogies of the steppes. To the people of the Gupta Empire, this academic distinction is meaningless. All they know is that a new and terrifying kind of barbarian is at the gate. For a long time, the stories are just that, stories from a distant frontier. But during the final years of the old Emperor Kumaragupta's reign, the whispers become a roar. The Hunas pour through the mountain passes of the Hindu Kush, overwhelming the border defenses. The news that reaches the capital is dire. They are not like the Soka kings, who were content to rule a western kingdom, nor like the southern kings Samudragupta defeated and turned into vassals. The Hunas, it seems, are not interested in ruling. They are interested in breaking things. As the crisis mounts, the emperor's son, the crown prince Skandagupta, is dispatched to meet the threat. You follow the mobilized Gupta army, a gleaming force of professional soldiers, as it marches northwest to confront the invaders. The contrast between the two forces is stark. The Gupta army is a picture of imperial order. The Hunas are a force of primal chaos. When the battle is finally joined, it is a bloody and desperate affair. The Huna cavalry charges are unlike anything the Gupta generals have ever faced. But the imperial army holds, just This becomes Skandagupta's defining moment. A mainstream historical fact that will be immortalized in stone. After a brutal conflict that he would later say caused the earth to shake, he drives the invaders back. In the aftermath, you get a closer look at the vanquished enemy, and you see something that makes your blood run cold. Many of the Huna warriors have strangely elongated skulls. You learn of their custom of binding the heads of male infants, artificially deforming their crania to create a tall, conical shape. It's a quirky and visually terrifying tidbit, a practice designed to mark them as a distinct and intimidating elite. It makes them seem utterly alien, inhuman even. Skandagupta returns to Pataliputra. Ahira, the old emperor, dies, and the savior of the nation ascends the throne. He erects a victory pillar at a place called and has an inscription carved on it, praising his own valor and boasting of how he vanquished the Hunas and restored the fortunes of his family. For a moment, it seems the crisis has been averted. The empire has been tested, and it has proven strong. But the victory rings hollow. You can see the cost in the thinned ranks of the army and in the anxious look in the new emperor's eyes. The war has been ruinously expensive, draining the once overflowing imperial treasury. You notice that the new gold coins issued by Skandagupta are subtly different from those of his predecessors. The gold is less pure, debased with other metals to stretch the dwindling supply. It's a small detail, but a telling one. The Golden Age is, quite literally, losing its luster. The Hunas were defeated this time, but they are still out there. Beyond the mountains, their storm temporarily abated, but not dispersed. You feel the first real tremors of fear for the future. The empire is like a magnificent old tree, still majestic, but the first rot has begun to eat at its roots. The victory pillar, erected by Skandagupta, stands proud and defiant against the sky. A final, bold statement from a golden age that is already beginning to tarnish. You stood there when it was new, but you remained long after, watching as the years wear on. Skandagupta, the great hero, the savior of the empire, spends the rest of his reign in a constant, draining struggle to hold the fracturing realm together. The hero's reward, it seems, is not peace, but a lifetime of patching and leaking dam. The Huna storm was pushed back, yes, but the cost was immense, and the pressure on the frontiers never truly goes away. When Skandagupta dies, the center can no longer hold. You watch as a succession of his relatives take the throne: Pulugupta, Narasimhagupta, Buddhigupta. Their reigns are a blur of diminishing returns. It feels a bit like watching a brilliant television series after the main star has left. The name is the same, but the magic is gone. These later emperors are not incompetent. Not all of them, but they are trying to command a tide that has already turned. The debased currency you noticed under Skandagupta becomes the new normal, a constant, metallic reminder of the empire's slow-motion bankruptcy. Then the Hunas return, and this time there is no Skandagupta to stop them. A new warlord named Toramana leads the charge, and he succeeds where his predecessors failed, establishing a terrifying kingdom in the lands of Punjab and Kashmir. But it is his son who becomes a legend of cruelty, a name that will be used to frighten children for centuries. Mihar, you see him not as a distant threat, but as a chilling reality. He is the antithesis of the Gupta ideal, where they were patrons of art and poetry. He is a patron of terror, where their rule was marked by religious tolerance. He is remembered as a vicious persecutor of the Buddhist monasteries that once flourished under imperial protection. You hear a story about him, a quirky and horrifying tidbit that perfectly captures his character. It is said that as one of his war elephants was crossing a mountain pass, it slipped and fell to its death in the ravine below. Mihirakula, rather than being dismayed, was supposedly delighted by the sight and sound of the animal's destruction. For his own amusement, he allegedly forced 100 more elephants to be pushed off the same cliff. The story is likely an exaggeration, a piece of propaganda to cement his villainous reputation. But the fact that people believe it, that they whisper it in terrified tones, tells you everything you need to know about the new age of iron and blood that has dawned. The constant warfare in the northwest is a fatal drain, but it's not the only problem. You feel the empire hollowing out from the inside. Remember those provincial governors and feudatory lords who ran their territories with such efficiency. They see the weakness at the center. The emperor's armies tied down hundreds of miles away, and they begin to get ideas. Their reports to Pataliputra become less frequent. The taxes they send become a trickle, then stop altogether. They start issuing their own coins, not with the emperor's portrait, but with their own. They quietly drop their subordinate titles and begin calling themselves Maharaja. The regional managers are breaking away to start their own competing franchises. The Matrikas in the west, the Mokharis in the Ganges Valley new dynasties, are rising from the ashes of the old empire's authority. This is the great, unresolved question of the empire's end. Historians still argue whether the Hunnic invasions were the primary cause of the Gupta collapse or merely a final, fatal blow to an empire already weakened by internal decay. Did the house fall because a storm knocked it down, or because its foundations had already been eaten away from within? From your vantage point, you see that it is impossible to separate the two. The Hunas bled the military and the treasury dry, which in turn made the emperor too weak to control his ambitious governors. It was a classic death spiral. The final, decisive Gupta resistance, led by Narasimha, manages to defeat and capture Mihirakula in a surprise victory, but even this doesn't reverse the tide. The empire, as a meaningful political entity stretching across northern India, is gone. The name Gupta will linger for a while longer, attached to a small kingdom in its original heartland of Magadha, a ghost of its former glory. You have come full circle, back to a fragmented land of competing local powers, the very world that the first Guptas rose from. The golden age has faded to bronze, and now to rust. The last debased coin of a forgotten Gupta king feels cool and light in your palm, a pale imitation of the heavy, pure gold of Vikramaditya's time. The story is over. Your long journey through the Golden Age has reached its twilight, and the clamor of its rise and fall now begins to dissolve into the quiet of the past. The vibrant colors of the Ajanta frescoes, the sharp intellect of the astronomers, the vicious cruelty of the Hunnic invaders, all these once vivid sights and sounds begin to recede, becoming soft, weightless memories. There is no need to hold on to them any longer. The great stage is empty now. The torches have been extinguished, and the whispers of the court have finally fallen silent, leaving only the gentle hum of the night. Feel the weight of your own body, the gentle pressure of the blankets, the slow and easy rhythm of your own breathing. Let the last embers of this ancient world glow and then fade into the darkness, allowing your mind to become as calm and as empty as a clear night sky. There are no more roads to travel, no more battles to witness, nothing more to do now but to let go. Just as the great empire dissolved back into the land, allow your own thoughts to dissolve into the quiet stillness of sleep. The journey is done. Now it is time to rest. Sweet dream.